The last paper in this session will be delivered by Cameron Roucher. Cameron manages the Rithfinny Wine Estate, a 170-acre vineyard in East Sussex, which he's developed over the last 7 years. He's originally from New Zealand, where he was involved in developing vineyards both in New Zealand and in Australia, and his topic is looking at UK viticulture, sustainable growth in a changing climate, and he's particularly interested in looking at how to optimise the potential of UK vineyards. Sponsored by the East Sussex NFU. Cameron.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a few thank yous. Firstly, to the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust. Much like a home nations rugby side, they decided to put a Kiwi on the team. To the very kind sponsorship from the East Sussex NFU, to my employers, Rathfinny Wine Estate, and finally to my patient and understanding wife and family for their encouragement and support while I went away for weeks at a time. I think the fact that you have me here talking to you about viticulture just highlights the growth of the industry in recent years and the importance of wine growing as part of farming, particularly in the southeast. Recently, over 83,000 acres in England and Wales have been identified as suitable for wine growing. In the last 10 years, UK vineyards have increased by 150%. 2.5 million vines have been planted in the last 2 years alone, bringing the area to 2,500 hectares. How can vineyards and the wine industry in this country continue to grow sustainably in a changing climate? This was the focus of my travel and studies, which is broken down into these 3 key areas. Investigate how premium wine regions overseas have managed to grow sustainably, particularly those in marginal climates. Identify best practices in cool climate viticulture, predominantly in relation to development of new vineyards, and determine how a UK wine grower can compete as the industry grows and becomes a significant international player. This year's harvest has been the best quality seen to date. This is mainly due to the weather this past season, which we can all probably agree is far from the norm. Bring on global warming. The summer mean temperature for 2018 was well up on long-term averages across the country. Rainfall generally lower than average. This is all good news for wine growers, but this isn't normal. Sure, we can expect the odd season to be like this, but expectations need to be checked. If you look back over the previous 7 years, the summer temperatures were actually cooler or similar to the long-term average on over half of those years. What this highlights is the climate is variable, and with variability comes risk. It is said that climate change affects wine growing more than any other agricultural crop. And while there's probably many of you in this room that don't necessarily agree with that statement, you have to remember that viticulture is a long-term game. Best case scenarios are that a new vineyard will start to pay for itself after 7 years. So the initial focus of my study was solely on climate, but as I went along, I discovered that anyone growing in a region deemed marginal had very similar problems. Spring frost, lack of labour, poor weather at flowering. It's these factors that make wine growing in this country a marginal proposition. Part of my focus therefore looked at the viability of grape growing and what measures need to be in place to achieve this. Good site selection is paramount. Location, location, location. I cannot stress this enough. Quality grapes start with a quality site. This is what makes site selection of a new vineyard so important. All too often, property owners get sucked into the dream of having a vineyard out front of their house. It's known as the Kellogg's approach. They're sitting there having their cereal. Old mate turns around to his wife and he says, "Beryl, I think we should put a vineyard out the front of the house." It's not ideal. So for those that have a less than ideal site, mitigating climate and weather events is necessary and was common across all the regions I visited. Windbreaks to improve local temperature, polytunnels and clochers for similar reasons were all used across various regions, but it was frost control that was of the most interest. Many UK growers currently use small paraffin wax heater pots to combat frost. These work on a basic principle of increasing temperature under freezing conditions. However, these are relatively inefficient due to the loss of energy and the labour-intensive nature of actually going out there and lighting them all. On the right is an older vineyard in Canada that's been redeveloped. To the rear of the image are 2 frost fans which come on automatically under freezing conditions. They push the warm air down from the inversion layer, far more environmentally friendly. But would our strict planning regulations ever let any one of these put one of these up? I doubt it, particularly when they start up at 3 a.m. in the morning. Better to find a frost-free site in the first place. Some of the better new developments I saw were in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia and Tasmania. Take, for instance, the O'Rourke family vineyard in Lake Country, the coolest of the Okanagan subregions. Like many vineyards in the Okanagan, this is a stunning site for a vineyard, but it's the planning, vision, and design that sets this place apart from others. Firstly, the site was carefully chosen due to its soil and proximity to the lake. They have about 240 acres of land, of which about 100 acres are currently planted. The entire vineyard was cleared of forestry and orchard, and then EM conductivity scanned prior to planting, resulting in a well-designed block and irrigation layout based around the soils. Furthermore, they've thought of the future. Who is the target market? Where is this wine going to be sold? By blasting through solid granite, they've created 12,000 square foot of caves to create a network of tunnels 300 metres long. The purpose of these is twofold. One, to store wine, but more importantly, it gives them an edge over their competitors. It's a unique visitor experience. This is where the UK wine industry is underdeveloped: tourism. Common amongst all the best operators I visited was the visitor experience, creating an experience that the customer won't forget and will make them buy into the brand. Ontario, Canada has around 2 million visitors per annum just for wine tourism. With around 165 wineries, over half of these only sell through their cellar door. Luckily for our UK wine industry, we have a unique position in the wine world, a ready educated local wine market without the need to incur high shipping costs that many other regions have to. The key to tapping this market lies in education of the public, not just as an industry. This is the role of individual producers. Tell a story, make yourself unique. This is what sells wine. Marketing is everything. It's therefore important that the UK develops further PDO regions and grower groups such as these already starting to group together in common marketing, increasing sales and awareness, increasing the business viability. It's one thing to increase sales, but how do we manage to keep our price point? Selling fruit too cheap or wine too cheaply is dangerous and bad for everyone in the industry, and not at all a sustainable model, especially in the UK with its historically low yields. The Tasmanian industry is a prime example of growth without losing value. There's a number of things that are interesting about this infographic. Tasmania's managed to distance itself from the mainland and managed to keep a reasonable price point to its wines, while the mainland continues to fight with supermarkets at the bottom of the barrel. The international figure here equates to about £6.27 versus £2.45 for mainland producers. Nearly a quarter of all visitors to Tasmania visit a cellar door as part of their visit. Can you imagine the impact to not only the business involved, but the rural community in general, if UK vineyards could grow their overseas visitors to anywhere near this proportion? The impact of the Tasmanian wine industry on the state economy is undeniable, even though it's actually smaller than the UK area. It's now ranked above dairy and only just behind meat in terms of dollar value to its contribution to the economy. Their state government has helped fund a lot of growth through research, ensuring vineyards are being planted on the right sites. It's helped to grow the industry in a sustainable manner. However, they still struggle with unreliable yields, much like we do in the UK. Regular yields are fundamental to the profitability of the vineyard. Even with all the other factors coming into play, without yield, obviously there is no end product. For too long, the UK has struggled with low yield. This is mostly due to weather and climate, but that's then generally linked to the site. We have to remember that the UK is at the climatic margins of suitability for wine growing. Robust site assessment needs to be completed to determine whether a new site is suitable for grapes before going ahead. Do everything you can to make your site better. Use windbreaks to accumulate warmth, frost control measures to battle the frost, and if in lower rainfall areas, consider irrigation. Quality fruit and regular yields are dependent on a number of factors. Give your vines every chance to ripen their fruit. Remember, we're turning sunlight into wine. In conclusion, I'd just like to go over a few take-home messages. A means of managing and adapting to climate variability must be worked through. Be prepared for variable seasons, both good and bad. Site selection is the single most important decision facing new vineyards. This will determine the future profitability of the venture. Do not settle for a second-class site. UK viticulture faces some substantial changes in the coming years. Those who are planting new vineyards shape the future for the whole industry. Growers and wine companies need to work with one another, as well as with industry bodies, government, and research and training organisations. Diversification is the key to maintaining a robust business model. Fight to be able to process on-site and sell at the farm gate. Planning restrictions can hinder growth. Remember, wine is an agricultural product. The UK wine industry has a bright future ahead. With careful planning and considered development, the industry will continue to grow and thrive. Thank you.